Top of the morning to you, Stephen.
Hi, Lucky the Elf from Lucky Charms commercials.
When this podcast comes out in a week, it won't be St. Patrick's Day anymore.
No.
But I just feel like I can't not mention that as of this moment, as we are looking at each other in the eye, it's the evening of St. Patrick's Day.
Sure.
We're both wearing green. I think
true.
It's very fitting that I'm wearing a green Ween shirt and you're wearing a green anime shirt. And I'm on my second Guinness out of a Mickey Mouse glass. I just feel like
hot.
I need to mention it. And I was kind of thinking about St. Patrick's Day earlier. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm
Hello.
Zach.
I'm Steven.
I was thinking about St. Patrick's Day and wondering, obviously the only reason anybody celebrates it is because they like to get sloshied, as I'm doing right now on some Guinness. But
Guinness,
are we
I believe.
celebrating something we should not be celebrating?
No,
Is it like
he drove the snakes out of Ireland.
Yeah, but I don't think snakes means literal snakes. I think it means people who were labeled to be snakes. I think there might be, I don't know if
That's
it's a
fair.
race thing.
Yeah,
I think we might
usually
have
with the
another
Irish.
Christopher Columbus on our hands.
I thought you were going to say another Mark Wahlberg or a Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson's Irish.
You live in Chicago. Do they dye a
Yeah,
body
it's like a
of
whole
water green?
They dye the river green, and then it's
That
like a
can't
whole
be
thing,
good
and then the
for
streets are
it,
just filled
right?
with people.
I
mean,
just
it's
imagine
not
what
the
it's
worst
like
thing that
if
gets
you're
put
one
in
of
the
the
river.
3 remaining living fish in
Yeah.
the body.
You're like,
What's the
"Fuck,
river?
oh."
What's the river?
The Chicago River.
The Chicago River.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like you're just hanging out doing your fish thing. You're like, whoa, what's going on here?
A whole lot of people up there. A whole lot of people
No,
up there.
just the cloud of green. Don't they dye it green? Just taking
Well,
over
they like
your,
put the
your
dye
home?
in, and then like a bunch of like speedboats like circle around to spread it around and mix it.
And
And
what's
everyone's
the
like,
point?
"Yeah."
Because some guy was racist and kicked them all out of his country, a different country than this one, some 14,000 years ago.
Yeah. Like,
Hi, everybody.
Zach, when I say that Chicago, like
belated
the streets
St.
around my
Paddy's Day.
studio are flooded with people for the entire Saturday of St. Patrick's weekend, it's a mess. That's why
What
I'm all
about
St.
today?
Patricked
It's Sunday.
out today.
Nothing
Well,
really on
everyone's
Sunday.
hungover today.
Yeah, that tracks.
They do it
so
on
it's just
Saturday,
another
'cause you know about the
Saturday.
Asians.
There's nothing
Yeah.
special. I'm excited. I'm going to have some time spent in Chicago with the legendary Stephen Baker very soon. I'm sure we're going to have some fun times. Nothing to say, nothing like, oh, I'm excited to hang out with my buddy. Nothing,
Just another
nothing on your end.
Saturday.
Okay.
Nothing special.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, a very special incarnation of our podcast. No matter where you're listening to us, I'm glad that you're here to join us as we are about to reveal the third of the 4 options you'll be voting between a little bit later this year to decide what our next rewatch podcast should be after we finish Into the Time Knife in The Good Place in, I don't know, I want to say like 2 months-ish.
Something like that, right?
It's coming up pretty soon. So that means the vote between the 4 is coming up very soon. I'm building up the suspense for the reveal of what it is, but if you clicked this podcast, it says very clearly in the title what we're talking about. But I still like to build suspense, don't you?
Well, I think a good magician always builds suspense, and you are nothing if not a magician, Zach.
Thanks.
If you've been using that magic set me and your uncle got you for your birthday last year, just
when
like
I
your
look
mom
at
told
myself
us
in
you
the
have
mirror
been.
every day, I do see Jesse Eisenberg circa Now You See Me Too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you like those movies? I like those movies.
I think I saw the second one on a date in the theater, and I don't think I've seen the first one. Or maybe I saw it afterwards. It didn't matter what movie I was seeing. I think they
Sure.
probably picked the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your head wasn't high enough above the seats to see much
Better
of
than the
that
time
movie.
you and I went on a double date to see American Sniper.
American fucking Sniper. That was my
Guys-
first date with that person.
Guys, you got to think about Zach and Steven and their dates in a theater in Indiana seeing American Sniper.
Did
what a
we
choice.
sit next to each other? Or did we sit far enough that we could
How
make
did
out
we
with our
not
respective
say,
dates?
how about we see literally anything else that's
Anything
playing
else?
right now?
Which was it? Us
must have
being
been a
like,
really
"Oh, I heard this is
slow
gonna get some
week.
Oscar buzz. Let's go see American Sniper."
Everybody's
Forget
talking
the
about
romance.
American Sniper. Do you remember anything from that movie? It's not
kills
because we were
himself at the
getting
end.
lucky. Does he? I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you that.
And like the last shot, I think, is like somebody singing the national anthem at like a football game or something, while he like shoots himself in the head. And then we went to McDonald's.
Is that true? Didn't the guy wasn't he still the guy who's based on
No, I think
is
he
still alive?
killed himself.
He killed
I'm pretty
himself.
sure.
Huh.
I could be
And
thinking
then we went to
maybe I'm wrong.
McDonald's.
Yeah.
I do remember the McDonald's more than the suicide.
Yeah.
Of course, our
As
next
one does.
podcast option that we're talking about today is American Sniper. You know, there's
There's
podcast.
a TV show now, isn't there? No.
American
That was Lone
Sniper?
Survivor. Wrong. Just seeing how everyone's
No,
doing
I think
afterwards.
you're thinking of the short-lived Limitless TV show. Another Bradley Cooper project.
Cooper. Yeah.
Yeah, followed by A Star Is Born, the series coming to Max next year with Camilla Cabello.
How many movies has Bradley Cooper killed
Jacob
himself at the
Elordi.
end of?
I've gone on my rant about him hanging himself in A Star Is Born. I'm not going to talk about it again. Let's get into the
just wanted to get
podcast.
another
Of
look
course,
at
we
you.
couldn't do anything that we do here without the kind people over at patreon.com/can't disappoint podcast. And those people that support us on a $10 and up level that we shout out on this program every week are Mary Baker Budisa, Danny M. Lugo, Justin Fortier, Lil S. Haker, and Autumn Marsh. Thank you very much. And if you would like to have your name added to that list, patreon.com/can't disappoint podcast gets you that, along with all of the exclusive content we've done over the last 4 years, including all 40 uncensored episodes of Brokeback Bebop and The Basement, our That 70s Show rewatch podcast, which I think our Dead Grandma episode that came out this week of The Basement is an all-timer and proves why that
definitely.
show needs to stay on the Patreon, far away from public consumption.
Forever.
So if you want to check that out, that's the place to do it. Patreon.com/can't disappoint podcast. Steven,
Yeah.
is there anything you'd like to bring up before we move into the hypothetical realm?
Absolutely. I wanted to update you, Zach, on a couple things. I think last week I told you I had started watching One Piece again because I finished all my seasonals.
If I'm being
And
honest, I don't remember you
It's
mentioning
okay.
that last
That's all
week,
right.
but that doesn't mean you didn't say it.
Well, in the last 5 days, I've watched probably 50 or 60 episodes of the show. I'm back into it. It's great. Watch
You're
One
almost
Piece.
to season 2.
Almost. I am in a new arc though. It's pretty good. There's toy people and slave trade and kids on drugs. It's great time. Fun stuff. But also, Zach, I jokingly said to you that, I think I'm going to listen through some Black Sabbath, and you were like, why? And I was like, I'm curious. I
know that might have
listened.
come off harsh. I don't
Yeah,
think I
it did come off
despise
harsh.
them or anything.
Mhm.
I just, if you were like, hey, I'm going to dive into an artist, this is
Yeah.
the decade, I'm coming off of Fleetwood Mac,
Yeah.
Black Sabbath wouldn't have been in my top 25, 30 guesses of who it
Yeah.
might be.
Well, it's been fun so far. I've made it through almost half the albums that I plan to listen to of theirs. I'm not going to listen
You're
to
not
all
going
of
to
them.
the later stuff?
Not
You
going to the
should-
2013's whatever the fuck that was called.
I think at the end you should skip all the way to that just to see what they're up to.
What they're up to now. It'd be curious. I'll check it out. I might enjoy the rest of this enough to do it, but I will rank the first 4 albums for you from worst to best.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I and nobody was asking. The
Well,
Fleetwood
'cause last
Mac
time I gave
thing
you
was
scores-
semi-interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I made you stop and do it my way.
Yeah. So I'm going to do it your way from the jump today, Zach.
I've got to say, as the completionist that I am, it really bugs me that you keep doing these deep dives on artists, but you only do a section of it, and then you all of a sudden rank them as if you have some type of authority on them when you've only experienced a percentage of their body of work.
Fleetwood Mac,
what
the
say you to
percentage
this?
makes sense because I was looking at the body of work with a specific lineup. That was the purpose of that.
It just does not
Listen
compute
through.
to me.
Because I don't
that you
care
wouldn't
what
listen to the
Nick
whole body of work.
Fleetwood has to fucking say. I care
Come
what Stevie Nicks
on.
and Lindsey Buckingham have to say.
Well, after all those SNL skits, it is time for Lindsey Buckingham to get his say.
To get his
finally.
words in, right?
Was Lindsey Buckingham not in the band initially?
No, neither.
I thought it was
Nick
Mick
Fleetwood-
Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham in the beginning.
No, he
And
heard
then Stevie
Buckingham Nicks and was like, oh, I got to get that fucking duo in here.
Oh,
And then he
right.
did.
Okay. Anyway, Black Sabbath. Let's hear your. You know
In
about
fourth-
Mac. I'm gonna keep interrupting you. You know about Mac Sabbath, the heavy metal band that dresses up as dark gothic McDonald's characters.
That's
One of them has
really
a
funny.
big hamburger head. One of them's Grimace. You should look at.
I'll look them up. I'll listen
You
to
should
them
look
next.
into them. Mac Sabbath.
Yeah.
Ozzy's in it too. He joined.
There we go. He's Hamburglar. In fourth place, their debut album, Black Sabbath, which I thought was pretty good, gave it a 7.8 out of 10.
70s.
Yeah, early 70s. Then number 3 is going to be Volume 4, which I just listened to
That's
today.
just confusing.
I know, very.
Number 3 is Volume 4.
Yeah, it's pretty good. 8.2 for me. Then the 2 standouts so far. In second place is Master of Reality, which I gave an 8.8. That's their 3rd album. Like that one a lot. Really great drumming. Really great, like, just guitar riffs too. Very, like, earwormy. And then number 1, getting a 9.6 for me, is
almost a perfect
Paranoid,
score.
Their 2nd album. That's
sure.
It's really, really good.
What got
War
you
Pigs
down this
classic.
kick?
I don't know, even it might have actually been doing the basement and hearing. I think in one of the episodes they play like War Pigs or something, and I was thinking, you know what,
That
I
makes
haven't
sense.
listened really to Black Sabbath ever, and I like metal, but I haven't listened to a lot of like OG metal. So
You gonna get into
like
Ozzy's solo stuff too?
All aboard! Ha, 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 ha.
Well, anyway, as you know, it's an election year here in the United States of America, and at Can't Disappoint Podcast, we're running out of Good Place episodes, and we've been having so much fun doing Into the Time Knife, and I'm a little bummed that we're almost to the end of it.
Yeah.
But I'm
Let's
always
make
really
more
excited.
The Good Place.
What the fuck was that?
I said, let's make more The Good Place.
Something else went on.
You
over
and
there.
I.
I don't know. You all right?
Yeah.
You and I should do like a Jack Black, whoever the African American in that film, Be Kind Rewind was.
Mm-hmm.
That should be us. Who was it? Was it Most Def?
Was
Is
it
that
Most
made
Def?
up? I don't think so.
I doubt it.
I just pulled a name out of the ether. Anyway, even though it's sad that we're running out of episodes of The Good Place, it's always a lot of fun for us to get together and decide what the next show we do should look like. And it's always impossible for us to decide on one of them by ourselves, between us. So we each come up with 2, we present them to you as an audience, and then we let you vote on them. We've done 2 for this next showing, this next vote so far. The first one was I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson, and the second one was Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, one of each of our options, and I think those would both make really great podcasts.
Absolutely.
And today, with Steven's next option, we're going in a totally different direction from anything we've done before as a main feed podcast, other than having a little bit of a connective thread to Brokeback Bebop, of course.
Sure.
Steven, why don't you clue the folks in on what we're talking about today?
You know, for the last 4 years, we have served you faithfully, going episode by episode through show after show after show. But what if...
Just 2. We've done 2. I guess we've done 3.
3, you bastard. That's why I said show after show after show.
You had to really
3
think
shows.
about it. Okay.
But what if we went film by film through the entire
The
history,
career.
the good, the bad, the ugly of
Clint
Studio
Eastwood. Exactly.
Ghibli. Going through Studio Ghibli's discography, filmography, artography, cartography, all their maps, looking at all of them, talking about them. But going through all the movies, I think that'd be a fun adventure. Definitely a departure from what we've done so far, but I think it'd be a fun thing to talk about. Zach, watching for today's episode, saw his first
the
ever
first Ghibli film
movie.
I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Well, before we talk about how the word should be pronounced, which I think is what we need to say first, why don't we close our eyes, fall asleep on a big furry tummy, and move into our hypothetical episode talking about Studio
Ghibli.
I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm not going to take it away from you, but I don't like it.
So how do you like the new place?
Dad, it's perfect! Hey, wait for me! It looks like it could be haunted. Totoro? Is that what your name is?
So you've seen him too. That's very interesting.
Maybe you were dreaming. Where's Totoro?
So, as a fan And as an appreciator of Japanese culture, how do you think the word should be pronounced? Is there a correct way to pronounce it, or is it a take your pick?
In Japan, and the way it is spelled in Japanese,
where you are not and have never been.
correct, it's pronounced Jiburi, because there's not really an L sound in Japanese, which would then be westernized to Ghibli, but seeing it spelled, and even myself, I have called it both, because the Americanization is Ghibli, because it's a G and an H next to each other, which would signify a hard G sound, even though it's originally pronounced with a soft G. So
tell me,
what can you do?
Again, you go with Ghibli.
Ghibli. Mm-hmm.
By this explanation,
Yeah.
the people who originally created the word
Yeah.
say something that leads you to Ghibli, a soft G. This is just like GIF in GIF.
No, it's not at all.
It's exactly like that.
How, Zach? Because GIF is a goddamn... It stands for graphic. It is a goddamn representation of an already existing word, as opposed to this, which was created.
I feel like I'm going to use both, but I've been leaning towards Ghibli maybe, but maybe now I'll start saying Ghibli because of your explanation.
Yeah, try it out. See how
See
you like
how
it.
it feels. Okay.
I don't get upset if someone says Ghibli,
Yeah.
but I didn't make it.
Well, there's a few things we need to talk about today. We're going to get to the film that we've watched, My Neighbor Totoro, to talk about as our hypothetical episode of our Ghibli podcast. But first, I would like for you to just give me a little bit of... Pixar and Ghibli are in a very similar conversation in the grand scheme of animated films.
Studios, in success.
Just in the way that they technically move things forward and seem to have an endless supply to a point of just exceptional stories to tell. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why Studio Ghibli is so important and why it would be important to dive into each of these movies and to get everything out of them?
For me, from the time I was a kid, Studio Ghibli kind of opened my eyes to the idea of worlds that were so far beyond what I had seen in shows and movies that they were really exciting and inviting to me. I think that, Pixar stands alone in terms of digital animation and telling stories that were maybe a little bit more mature than I had gotten before, but I think that Ghibli takes that even a level further in terms of I don't even want to use necessarily the word severity for all the films, but for just a sense of maturity and calmness. And
that's a great way to describe the film we're talking about today. Calmness, maturity. We were talking off mic how I remember thinking these films were a little boring when I was a kid. And it's exactly because of what was shoveled down our throats. The Pixar films are mature, but they're a lot more slap, bang, boom, colors, animals, cars, characters, jokes, flying ideas, 20,000 ideas a second. And the Ghibli movies, or at least this one that I've seen, so now I feel like I can speak on them all as a whole. They really take their time, even when a film's only 80-something minutes long. They really take their time. And I don't know, an American movie called My Neighbor Totoro about these characters, about these kooky creatures, would be a totally different thing.
Totally different. Totoro doesn't show up in this movie until 30 minutes in, and he's in it like 3 or 4 times.
And I'm excited to have these conversations. I'll let you get back to Ghibli, but I think a big question whether Totoro is even real or there. Is a thing, whereas in an American film, it would be like, we're going to the land of the Totoros, and we've got to help them get to Totoro Mountain.
And the dad would be flying on a Totoro.
Totoro's voiced by David Schwimmer. I don't know why David Schwimmer, but...
Come on, David Schwimmer, let's... Can we pay David Schwimmer on Cameo to read all of Totoro's lines? To go, Totoro. Aww. But yeah, I think... that combined with, when it comes to pushing animation forward, we watched a movie today that came out in 1988, the same year as one of the most impressive animated features of all time, and it's not Totoro.
What came out that year?
Akira came out in 1988. And they're very different movies, very different stories, but the animation of Totoro doesn't feel to me like it's old or outdated. It just feels very quaint and something very like... I don't know. It evoked a sense of nostalgia in me. And I didn't watch Totoro really as a kid that I remembered a ton. But just the way that things sound, the way that things look in a Ghibli movie, it feels so real, but also so fantastical that it I don't know. It's like
It feels timeless and new at the same time.
It's like ASMR for my heart is how I describe
Totally.
like the vibe
Visual
of Ghibli.
ASMR in moments, and the sound. You're right. The music is very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
What was the first Ghibli movie you remember watching?
The first one I ever watched was probably Princess Mononoke, which is my favorite.
I think I remember you saying that.
Yeah, that one I watched when I was like 7 or 8, and it just like totally blew my mind. And so then it was like whatever the library had or family video, like renting them and watching
What
them. So
age
then it was
did you say?
I was like 7 or 8, I think, when I saw Princess Mononoke for the first time, and it was an awakening for me because I liked, like Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that, but I hadn't really watched anime movies until I started watching Studio Ghibli and seeing that and Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and Kiki's Delivery Service. And there's still a lot that I have never seen, but that I'm so excited
There's like 20-something
Yeah.
movies. Whether
There's a
this
lot.
is our next podcast or not, I think I'm in on watching through the filmography now, slowly over time.
Absolutely.
I think the first one is Castle in the Sky.
Castle in the
Is that what
Sky.
it's called?
It's either,
I think I wanna-
either Nausicaa or Castle in the Sky is 1st.
I want to go back and I want to watch those and I want to watch forward.
Mm-hmm.
I remember from the time I was a kid, Studio Ghibli movies always had this air of cinema, of fine film, of sophisticated animation to the point where I wasn't really that interested as a kid. But I do remember when Spirited Away came out and when it was winning a bunch of awards. I believe it was only the second or third year of the Best Animated Picture, and which it won. I forget what it was up against. I just watched a really interesting video where a guy went through every single year of Best Animated Feature and
that's
talked about
cool.
all the movies every year and talked about what should have been nominated every year instead. That was really interesting. I just remember Spirited Away being a really, really big deal when that movie came out.
Is that 2001, I think? 2002, something around there?
And I have memories of this. I have memories.
Because it was that big of a thing.
I would have been 4. I
Yeah.
have a specific memory of the type of DirecTV cable that we had at the time.
Nice.
And Spirited Away being one of the films that was on like pay-per-view. And back then you could watch like it was a channel that showed the same movie over and over again on
And
loop.
you could watch like the first minute and a half or
5
something.
minutes or less,
Yeah.
yes. Or you could pay like $6 for a movie or something, however much it was, and then you could watch it for like 24 hours on that
Yeah.
loop. You couldn't DVR it yet. You just got access to the channel where it was playing. I remember Spirited Away being one of those movies. When I went to Christian school, I had a little black market thing going where people would give me like $10. I'd record a pay-per-view movie onto a
Nice.
VHS for them, and my parents just didn't
Holy
notice
shit.
for a while. I had
That's
that going
legendary,
for a
Zach.
little
That's
while.
pretty
Yeah,
good.
Thank you. So I remember Spirited Away as a kid being something that was a really big deal. Is that one of the better ones? Probably.
Yes, it's a lot of people's favorite. There's kind of 3 that are usually argued between as being the best one.
Spirited
Boy
Away.
and the Heron has to be in that conversation now too, but Spirited,
Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle,
and
Let me guess.
Princess Mononoke. Oh,
Princess
sorry.
Mononoke. I think I would have gone a different. Like Kiki is delivery service.
Kiki is thought of and loved by a lot as well.
Yeah.
Kiki's great.
I want to talk a little bit about, before we dive really into Totoro, to talk about what we think a Ghibli podcast would and should be to give our audience a little bit of an idea. Because I've got ideas. I don't think one podcast per movie is enough. I think we'd have to do 2 to 4 podcasts on each movie, do like a reactionary type episode, like a first time watch for me, and then do some like breakdown stuff and to do some like subbed versus dubbed type stuff.
Yeah.
And to really get into the nitty gritty of these films that I feel like people would love to maybe not take it moment by moment quite in the way that we do with TV shows, but I almost think you could. It'd be kind of fun, and I feel like there'd be people that would like that would be into that. I know there's some freaks out there
like
that would love
with
that
your
stuff.
idea, I think it'd be cool to do like 30-minute episodes, one that's an initial reaction, one that's a sub versus dub, one that's a music and art breakdown, and one that could be more of a story type thing,
breakdown.
right? And
I like that idea.
Parables and what things represent, because Ghibli's huge on representing different things with other things, like in this, we can talk about it later, but there's all sorts of symbolism in this for different things that you can go through, and ties into the real filmmakers' lives, and Miyazaki's childhood in this one is maybe one of, if not the most autobiographical of the Ghibli movies. So it's really
before like The Boy and the Heron, maybe, and I think The Wind Rises is supposed to be really autobiographical.
Yeah,
as well.
there's a character in The Wind Rises, and the dad in this look almost identical, and they also look just like Miyazaki's dad. So there's a lot of connection there.
Well, why don't we dive into My Neighbor Totoro?
Let's do it.
I'm excited. I was excited to watch this movie, to finally cross a Ghibli movie off the list. And I would have been fine with all of the movies that you've mentioned so far. You even threw out Ponyo as an option. I remember when that came out.
Yeah.
I remember really the Disney era of Ghibli movies, because that's when we started getting a lot of advertisement of them on
and
Disney
a lot of
Channel.
Disney stars voicing in the English dub. I remember Bridget Mendler was in Arrietty, and I was hyped.
I was going to mention, like, Arrietty, Ponyo are two movies that I really clearly remember the promotional era of those films. I remember them being advertised a lot. But this one, My Neighbor Totoro, this is the second Ghibli movie, I believe. And it was originally released in Japan on April 16th, 1988. It's a long time ago. How many years ago is that?
That's
You're gonna
almost
be faster
40.
at math than me right now. 40 years ago. And man,
Almost
the
40.
animation in this film is so crisp, so clean, so clear. It looks so great. I think hand-drawn
The running
animation
is so smooth for 40 years ago. It's crazy.
so much of it. Even there are a couple moments that use early prototypical CGI kind of stuff, and even that looks better than some of the stuff we were watching in Cowboy Bebop that was 10 years later or whatever. No, I think the movie looks really great. All of the visuals are amazing. Mostly what gets me are the backgrounds and the wildlife. I love some shots of running water. There's a moment where they're pumping the pail full of water and it overflows. I think is a really great shot. I love the look of this movie. That's my favorite thing really about this movie, is just kind of living in it for the 90 minutes that it goes on. It's a very vibey movie. It's a very inviting space. The otherworldly creatures in the movie are very inviting to spend time with, and it's a lot of fun to spend that time with them.
I think it's really cool to see something that looks unlike something you've seen before. And I think that's something we don't get often enough in Western media, because by the time a movie is an animated movie, either it's a remake of something that was a book or was a movie or was something we've seen before, or it's something new but similar to something else. Whereas, at least when I was a kid, I had never seen something that looked like Totoro or looked like the Soot Sprites or looked like the little spirits or anything like that. And it's just so cool. The freaking cat bus is animated so smoothly for a movie that came out.
The sounds, I love
80s.
the sounds. I love the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Whenever the
It's
cat
so
bus
good.
opens, it's so funny. And all of the sounds, whether it's May crunching on cucumbers, it is a really vivid sound. There's really great sound design in this. Something that you said made me think of with Western animation, with newer animated movies. If it's an original idea, it goes through the sausage factory of 30 executives, 8
That's too
screenwriters.
scary. That looks too much like this.
This
make
won't
it
play
this
in
color.
this country. Where something like My Neighbor Totoro, even though I'm sure the team on this film is huge, it feels like a singular voice crafting the story, the look and feel of the film in a way that you don't get a director writer like Hayao Miyazaki in Western animation. You just don't. It's so many people work on these films. This feels like this guy had an idea. He felt the world that you live in this movie, and he was able to bring it out in a really beautiful way.
The thing for me that, and why I kind of get emotional watching Totoro, even though I had this discussion with Danny because she saw that you gave it 3.5 stars, and she was like, "That's like crazy low," and I was like,
"That's a good score
honestly."
for me.
I was like, for Zach,
7
that's
out
like
of
really
10
high.
is a good score.
Well, and I have Totoro usually between a 7 and an 8 for me. And it's not because I don't think it's a great movie, but I think that, it's short, it's fun, it gets to the point. But I think this movie for me captures some of the magic of childhood, and even like magic of childhood that I never experienced, I experienced through this movie. Just the pure carefree nature of being a kid and exploring and running around and creating pretend worlds, whether they're real or not. And then that sense of that childhood, when one child has to leave that, but still stays with one foot in it for the other, that is such a beautiful and real thing that as an older sibling, that's something that unfortunately a lot of people have to go through is, okay, something serious is there now, I have to step up, but you're still a kid. And no matter what sort of circumstances are around you, that doesn't change the fact that you're still a child and that there's still amazing things that you'll experience for the first time. And I don't know, just some of this world feels so real. And I love it.
One of my very, very favorite things about the film is the way it treats children. Not just the core sisters, but children in general. I love the classroom scene where you see there's a kid in the background that has like a pencil under his nose that's playing silly. Or Kanto, when he's in class, he doodles all over his test paper, which is so true to like little boys. And I even think his crush on...
I love Kanto.
Satsuki, is that her name?
Satsuki.
His crush on her, and the way that he's kind of a dick, but in a warm way by the end of it.
When her dad was like, I acted exactly that way when I was his age. Like, that's just, he's, but also that he's this kid that is pretty poor. He is farming when he's not at school, which is a life that a lot of people experience, and especially during this time period in rural Japan.
I
like,
didn't know
they
watching
had days
the
off
movie
work.
That it took place in the 1950s.
Yeah. And that's kind of one thing that's kind of cool is that, and that's how you can tell, okay, this is somebody who's an adult that's talking about their childhood experience being from a very rural area where you have rice planting day where you're not at school.
Where do you get that from? You feel like there's an older version of the character that's narrating the story? Is that what you're saying?
Miyazaki, I say, and
okay,
more so, and it's funny because he said in an interview that the reason why the two characters are girls is because it would have been too hard for him to make one with two boys, which it really was him and his brothers that had to move to the country to be closer to the hospital where his mom was when she was dealing with spinal tuberculosis. And then in the novelization of Totoro, like they actually do say the mother has tuberculosis. They don't say that by name in the movie, but
what I love is what it feels like to be a kid, what it feels like to explore, what it feels like to deal with heavy things when you're a kid, and what it feels like to be able to let it go and still just be a kid in that time. I think not that the movie ever loses me, but it's that there isn't really so much of a plot to the film. It's all vibes, and I really like the vibes, but it was kind of one of those, the movie was happening while I didn't even know it was happening type things, which is fine and which is good. And the other thing was, maybe I would have been more emotionally affected by some of it if it wasn't kept so vague. I feel like you do see it through the children's eyes, and they're so happy-go-lucky that it feels like kind of a happy-go-lucky movie when there's some real family trauma at the core of it that I feel like we only get to see a little hole of light of.
I feel like one scene that sets the tone for that and captures it so well, and that I never noticed until watching it this time through, when they first get to the new house and the kids are like playing with like the broken like rod that's like rotted away and like it could collapse and kill somebody at any moment.
It's gonna fall down.
They're like, oh, this is fun. When they're probably, their dad is probably like, oh shit, this could like fall and hurt the kids. Like, I have to deal with this. My wife is in the hospital.
We've got so much stuff to do. You're talking about great stuff, but let's do some trivia and let's do some recap, because I feel like we're diving into stuff we shouldn't be diving into yet.
I know, we got ahead of ourselves. We got excited. We were swept away by the
way that
forest
the
spirits.
kids are just all over the property. The way when they're looking for the staircase
that's
inside,
such a good scene.
Or when they're outside, and even though it might not hold up nowadays, the like Indian hand motion and when she's outside,
being kids and they're playing.
Yes, and it's so true to being a kid, and something that
it was the 50s. You could do that back then.
You never see this type of observation about children out of children characters in animated films very often. They're either too smart or too annoying or too cute or too plot driven. These are just kids.
Every kid is a super genius in the movies you grew up with. They're like, oh, I'm smarter than you adults. I know what's really going on. But these kids are just playing the fuck around. Like they're vibing.
Okay, let's do some trivia first, or do you want to do a recap first?
Let's do the recap first, Zach. So I have a working title for this segment, and I think it's gonna be kind of funny. So we're gonna call this the Miyazaki Minute, even if it's not a Miyazaki Ghibli film, because Zach, you're gonna have 30 seconds to recap the movie during this Miyazaki Minute. You're gonna be thinking, that's unfair. That's not a lot of time. Well, guess what, Zach? Life's not fair. And that's the message that's portrayed in these movies.
I'm not too mad at it. You think that's the message? That life isn't fair?
Yeah, life sucks. You don't get enough time to recap.
I think 30 seconds is fair. I'm really not sure how this is going to go because, like I
Yeah.
said, there's not a ton of plot, but yet I feel like there's a lot that I need to say.
Yeah.
And I think the 30 seconds are going to go faster than I think. And I'm 2 Patty's Guinnesses deep.
Exactly. So is
let's
that going
see
to
where
slow
this
you down
goes.
or speed you up?
Slow me down, certainly.
All right, Zach. On go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Satsuki and her sister Mei moved to a rundown house with their father in a rural area while their mother is sick in hospital. And to distract from all of this and deal with the truths that they have to face, they meet Totoro, a magical troll from childhood books that Mei read, and they use their childhood imagination to deal with the trauma of the sickness of their mother. And they... I don't know. I feel like I have to call it. There's still a lot of time left, isn't there? There's
You're at 30
umbrellas
seconds,
and it rains.
bud. You're done.
Yeah, I didn't
You're
know what
done,
to
buddy.
say at all.
You were doing fine. You were
but
stuttering
I
a
didn't know
little bit.
where to go from
Yeah.
there at all.
You know, I could have gotten some stuff about the
Kanta.
dad.
The
I could
dad,
have gotten
sure.
some Kanta, some Granny,
I'm
some May
sorry.
going missing.
No, it wasn't great. It wasn't
Could have
great.
gotten something about the soot sprites, the acorns, any of that. But you did a good job of
Cat
talking
bus.
about the two
The setup.
protagonists. Yeah,
Yeah.
are Satsuki and May, our
I got that.
heroine. You got about the mom. You got about them dealing with their emotional traumas
get
and
it
things
over
like that.
with.
Could have gotten some more about Satsuki having to play the role of the mother and be the
Sure.
adult, which is like making a luncheon, things like that. I'm gonna give
That's
you
fine.
a C minus.
That's
week,
fine.
Zach.
That's fine.
You did a good job with what you gave me, but you didn't
Yeah,
give me much.
I should have put a little bit more thought into it. I'm sorry to everyone. I am the Ghibli newbie when it comes
It's
to
true.
this, and I really want to be a sponge. I want to soak up all of the
Yeah.
knowledge that
You want me
Steven
to-
has
to-
about this
to
world
slop you
and
in
about
my
these
Ghibli
movies.
soup.
And I want to be a sponge to soak up all the goodness of these movies, all this Ghibli
like a ripped
nutrient.
up baguette.
Okay, let's do some trivia. I don't really have that many questions for you. I think I have 5.
I didn't do that many. Yeah, I think I probably have 6.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, what kind of candy does Satsuki offer her dad?
A caramel.
Yeah, you got it.
How long should the girls keep pumping the water?
Ooh, until it's cold? Mm-hmm. Nice. What's the family's license plate number?
Oh my god, no clue.
That's fair. That's just kind of a fuck you question. 3284. That's what we were looking
On
for.
the tip of my tongue, almost said it.
3284.
What does May ask her dad to be while she plays outside?
Ooh. I remember the scene. Careful?
No, it's more literal than that. He's going to be the flower shop. She brings him flowers and says, "You're going to
Yeah.
be the flower shop."
It's true. I missed that one. Good question. Good question.
Okay.
Where has the
Thank you.
dad wanted
Thank
to live since he was a little boy?
Oh, no clue.
In a haunted house, he says.
Oh, in a haunted house. Yeah, I was thinking geographically.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. What is Kanta building in the rain?
Oh, he's working on a little model airplane. Mm-hmm. Did you know that Hayao Miyazaki's dad was an aeronautic engineer?
No, you know I don't know that. But isn't that what The Wind Rises is about?
Yeah.
Airplanes? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cute.
I really liked the moment when Satsuki comes over to Kanta's and it's a cute moment and he doesn't react while she's there. But when she's gone and after his mom is like, "Who was that?" Then he starts nearoming with his
Yeah, it's
airplane
so
because he's having an
cute.
excited crush moment. It's very cute.
I love when he like gives them the umbrella and is running away and just cracks the smallest little smile because he's like, "Nice, I did it." Like, it's adorable.
Relatable for sure.
Why didn't the girls have school the day they visited their mother?
Well, this is interesting because I want to talk sub versus dub. The subbed version, the translation, the line is different. In the dub, they say it's because it's like rice
Rice planting day.
day.
Rice fart? Yeah.
In the sub, it just says they have a school holiday.
Yeah, that's an interesting difference. I wonder, I don't
A lot
know
of
enough
interesting
Japanese to
differences.
listen.
The moment when they're sitting outside and they're eating food off of a plate.
What do they call it
say-
in the sub?
In the dub, they say it's cake. In the sub, it's rice patties.
Yeah. So a big
looks like
thing,
mochi.
like a big running
like
joke
dumplings,
in a lot of
yes.
anime dubs, or that anything that's non-American food they change to like something random. Like in
Oh,
Pokemon, they're eating like
interesting.
onigiri and they keep calling them jelly donuts, and it's like really funny.
That's not a jelly donut.
Because they thought that American kids couldn't understand eating
Yeah.
rice, I guess. I don't know.
It is interesting where they decide to change things that are topical and where they don't, because there's
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And I'm surprised they didn't just change all their names to like Gary Johnson and Megan Parker and stuff
Come
like
on,
that.
Matthew! My daughter Matthew, is she here?
I think it's my turn.
It is
how
your
many
turn.
legs? Let me ask. My question is, how
Ooh.
many legs does the cat bus have? But I have a follow-up question.
Yeah. I guess I would say 10.
I really hoped you weren't going to say that because I counted 10 and Lil counted 12. So the jury's out. I went with Lil. I
Does
think
Lil
maybe
think
12.
that there are feet in the middle that are on the ground? Because
I
there's
don't know.
6
I
on the
can't speak
side,
for
2 in
them.
the front, 2 in
They're
the back.
not here. They're just a wall over. I can't speak for them.
I-
I'll accept
We'll
your
settle
answer.
this right now.
Okay. Let me ask you my follow-up question. Is Catbus the character's name, or is Catbus what it is? Would you say that is the Catbus, or would you say there is Catbus, like it's its name?
I think it is a cat bus.
Okay, so there are many, but we only see the one multiple
It's
times.
12. Lil is right.
There you go. So you're wrong.
I'm wrong. There's
You got another
12 for
question?
sure. I do have 2 more. How long was the mom supposed to be home?
For the weekend.
Sure, I'll take that from Saturday to Monday. So, weekend-ish.
Ish. Okay.
Yeah.
I've got
And
one more question
hit
for you.
me.
In
Hit me.
which department of the university does the dad work?
Archaeology?
Yes.
Nice. How long a walk was it from Matsugo to the hospital?
Well, I remember when she stops the people driving, she says, I've come from Matsugo. I'm like, whoa, are you fucking crazy? Is it
Yeah.
2 hours?
You're really close. It's 3 hours. Granny says earlier that May couldn't make that walk. It's 3 hours even for a grown-up.
That's another thing in the dub, it's Granny. In the sub, it's Nanny, I believe.
So what they call her in the sub, if I remember correct, is Oji-san, which is like
Old
it's
lady
usually
caretaker.
translated. Yeah, it's just like old lady. So,
Yeah.
so then that would be translated like granny. So it's kind of like a weird thing.
A lot of interesting sub versus dub stuff. Like
Yeah.
in the sub, they just call them dust bunnies the whole movie. In the sub. And then in the dub, it's first
Soot
they say
sprites.
soot gremlins the first time.
And then when
they
Granny's
say
like,
soot
no, they're soot
sprites,
sprites.
which is what I've always known them to be. That's
Yeah.
an image I was familiar with. I have friends with them tattooed on them and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I go with soot sprite on that one.
Right. It's just interesting the choices that are made.
Because I think for some
I
of
think
the
Dust
stuff,
Bunnies works fine, actually.
it does work fine because
Because
that's
that's
what we
what they
call
are.
them in the United
Yeah.
States cultures. We call them dust bunnies, but they call them
Soot
soot
Sprites
sprites.
is more
and-
fantastical, and the
Yeah.
character, it fits more the characters.
Well, and I think, and this is a debated thing, whether they are the thing from Japanese culture that people think they are, or whether there's something that Miyazaki just made up that are different. But there's like a thing kind of like
Did you
that.
ask me your
that in
last question?
Japanese
Because I want to talk
culture-
about this. Did you ask your last question? Are we done?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay, go ahead.
We're done.
Sorry,
But
go
there's
ahead.
like a thing that is similar in Japanese like lore that like you're supposed to see them like before you die, which is maybe why the old lady was like, if they don't see you as bad, they'll go.
That's another sub versus dub. In the sub, it just says, if you smile, they'll leave.
That's
in
cute.
the dub, it's if they can tell you're a good person, they'll leave. Mm-hmm. And even in the visual, when it's the sub, it's she smiles and says, if you smile really big, they'll leave. But then in the dub, it's genuine. If you are happy, if you are a good person, they'll leave.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how magical, if at all, do you think the world in which this movie takes place is?
That's the big question, huh?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
I think I like to watch this movie through the lens that the forest spirits are real and that they only show themselves to the kids.
The forest spirits meaning Totoro and his companions.
Totoro and the soot sprites and all that.
And then for me, I feel like it's just all imagery and it's childhood imagination. The soot sprites are when you see things floating in the dark and you're
Sure.
scared. And also moments like the granny saying, I saw them when I was young too. That it's almost like a Polar Express Santa Claus belief in magic kind of thing. But then again, of course, there's the moment at the end with the cat bus and the corn makes it to the mom. Did they actually go there? I don't know. And the movie wants you to ask those questions, but I don't know if I
feel like the movie leaves it up into interpretation until they get Satsuki to Mei and then to the hospital. Because neither of them knew their way around well enough to get to the hospital from where Mei was.
I agree, but I even think then you could look at it as an interpretation of, because they have this childhood sense of play, I know where my sister's going. I know how to find her in a way that all the adults don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it is concrete. I get what you're saying, but I don't know. Because even the cat bus, when they're on it, it's like, oh, nobody else can see it or us.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I think any of it's real.
I think in the Ghibli world, there's enough magic for me to say that there's magic in this.
Oh, sure. Is there a theory of all of the movies taking place in the same universe? Is that a thing? Like a connected Ghibli verse?
I think I've seen some stuff with that because there's a couple of magical creatures that show up in multiple.
Because I'm just saying purely based off of this film. Where like they grow the giant tree and then the next morning the giant tree is not there, correct?
It's just acorns, yeah.
Yes.
Or it's just
so
sprouts.
It did sprout. I feel like there's a lot of things pointing in... I feel like there are more things pointing towards it being childhood imagination after watching the movie twice, but...
Yes, I would agree. But I think that's why it would be even more fantastic for it to be real. Like when they find Mei the first time and she's just in like a little spot that there is no big secret hole that leads to the tree.
And when she's trying to find it again, she keeps ending up on the opposite ends of the one-way thing, that it's not there.
And like when Satsuki and Mei are scared of the rain, then Totoro shows up and is with them and is there to keep them safe. And, you know, right before the dad's bus
and takes the umbrella, so they don't have the umbrella. And that's interesting. Maybe this goes along with my just not believing in magic and just being a cold-hearted, dead, unalive person. I had a point that I wanted to say. What else should we talk about in the movie?
The music in these movies, Hisaishi, I always forget the I. Joe Hisaishi does a lot of the really well-known music for the Ghibli movies. I think probably the most famous one. Yeah.
Or did he pass?
I think he's still alive. He does concerts still every once in a while.
That's cool.
Where he like has an orchestra play it like below the scenes happening, which is really cool.
I've never been to that for any movie, and I would really love to.
I would really
think that'd
like
be a lot
to
of fun.
too. I think the standout song for me from this, unlike other Ghibli movies, this one has like two like songs with words, which is kind of fun.
Beginning and end, right?
Yeah. Almost like an anime like TV show would, like where there's like an opening and an ending.
And there's
theme,
storytelling involved in the songs
which
too.
is cool. I like those. But the standout song for me is the one it's called Not Afraid. It's like the probably the most famous song from Totoro, like score wise.
Well, I noticed so many score moments that work for me, but I don't know what any of them are. Can you give me a couple bars?
I always want to sing the wrong one for this one.
Sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I know. I literally was singing it in my head and then I fucked it up. But
I really liked a moment that played. It's at nighttime and there's like a repeated rhythmic vocal thing. It's like bap 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 bap. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I like that one too. Yeah, that's
you know what I'm talking about?
Is it when it's raining?
I want to say no.
Or a different one?
I think it is different, but maybe they play it then too. Again, I'm not an expert. But I did notice that there were moments all over the score that stood out and melodies that stand out. There's one later in the film that's really good too. Which one are you talking about?
This is the one when it plays for the first time when they're like getting ready to go to sleep when they're in the bath and they're like talking about being scared, and if you laugh, then whatever you're scared of will go away, and then it starts playing there. It's the first time they play it, and they kind of come back to it a few times in the film. They also do like an orchestral version of the bum 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 a couple of times, which is pretty cool. I like shit like that. I love a reprise.
I thought the music was great all over. Another thing that I think the sub is better than the dub in that regard, hearing the Japanese vocals,
it's more
I don't know, the sub, it didn't subtitle the songs with voices, so I didn't know the storytelling parts of the song while I was watching it, but I still preferred that, I think, than...
Yeah.
It was kind of a clumsy translation to English a little bit, where the words don't come off very artful in English. It's just, this is the creature that you see when you are young, and then you do not see him when you grow up. It doesn't quite have the same beauty to it as
not
when it's
at
in
all.
its original
language. It's like, this is the story of a guy named Totoro, and you're gonna meet him.
But I do think in general the dub was pretty good. I thought there were lines that were changed a little bit that added depth to the characters and the story. One of my biggest problems, and this is definitely a cultural thing, I think the voices are great in the sub, but in the last third of the film, when there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot
It's
of
hard for you to
screaming
tell who's
May.
who.
No, it's annoying. The voices are shrill and loud, and it wore me down. And it's because of the voice acting. It's because of where it's just because it's different from what I'm used to in voice acting. I didn't hate it because I think they got the kid voices just right. But there was a point in the end of the film in the subbed where it was starting to grain on me, and it didn't so much in the dub. I thought it was a little bit more
Reserve.
But I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's just what my ears are. I don't know. I'd be interested if we did end up doing this podcast for you to watch the Japanese version and tell me if you agree at all.
It's
Have
funny
you ever
because
watched the Japanese version of Totoro?
I usually only watch the Japanese version of Totoro. This was only my second time seeing it in English, I think. Because the DVD that I own of it's in Japanese is how I choose to watch it usually. But I'm also more used to watching stuff with Japanese voice acting, which is different than English voice acting. There's a lot of differences in how things are played, and it's funny because if you watch more anime, then you think that English voice acting either sounds like they're just reading words or like it's like too cartoonish. But if you are used to Western acting, you think the same thing about Japanese. So it's very interesting.
It is interesting. And something I think about when watching foreign film is if I'm watching something in a foreign language and I'm reading the subtitles, it's harder for me to judge how good the dialogue and acting is because I'm not, like, if it sounds realistic because I don't know the language and I don't know how they speak. Whereas when I'm watching something in English, I can definitely say, that's not how people talk.
Yeah.
That's not what people would say. That comes off really clumsy. So I think I just give everything that's not in English the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that sort of thing. But there was a point when I would have gone right to the dub first. As I've started watching more foreign film, I think animation makes the most sense to watch a dub, especially if you're a kid. And if you're just a movie enjoyer, an American movie enjoyer, I would probably suggest that you watch the dub. But if you're if aficionado at all, if you appreciate film, I think it's always worth watching a film as it was originally intended to be seen first.
Absolutely.
Which is what I did. I watched the sub first, and I think that was the right way to do it.
Well, and I think with anime, what usually happens with me is I'll watch usually the sub first, even with shows that I really, really like. And then I'll go back and watch it again with the dub. And there's, like, one of my favorite shows of all time. I have a different favorite character in English versus Japanese.
That's really
just
cool.
because of the performance.
What show?
Konosuba. My favorite character in Japanese is Megumin, and my favorite in English is Darkness. And it's like not close in the two. Like, I love that character so much just because of the delivery, and it's pretty similar lines in each one, but it's just how that character
The line read is totally different. Sure.
Mm-hmm. And I love
it makes
that.
a huge difference. Like, I thought the type of quiet that the dad was, I think worked better in Japanese than it worked in English. But I thought that the girls kind of worked better in English than they did in Japanese.
Because the dad's a lot more goofy in English than
I thought
he is
the granny's voice in English was a lot. Yes, the dad is goofier in English, which I thought improved
liked that.
bathtub moment when he like starts laughing so they can pretend they're not scared. I think that moment, there are a couple moments that worked better for me in English. I kind of took some stray observations throughout the movie. Did you take notes at all, or are you just kind of speaking from the heart?
Mostly from the heart. I took a couple notes on... I did want to mention, because this came out in 1988, I said earlier that Akira came out that same year. So did Grave of Fireflies, which is another Studio Ghibli movie that couldn't be on the other end of the spectrum on whether or not a kid should watch this movie. Do you know what Grave of Fireflies is about at all?
No, but before you tell me, I want to say in my research, I learned that Totoro, as part of getting released, Totoro and Grave of Fireflies were like on the same bill. I think they were released at the same time and like screened back to back. So you would buy a ticket and see both films, I think.
Jesus Christ. That's crazy. Because Grave of Fireflies takes place right after World War II. And it's the story of a child trying to get his infant brother, because their parents were killed in a bombing, trying to carry them to safety. And
What a Barbenheimer split.
yeah. And like a big plot point of the movie is them trying not to starve to death because there's no food whatsoever because they were just bombed by the United States.
Don't spoil too much.
Yeah. But that's
Sounds
like
good.
That's
I'd
the
like to
setup
see
for
that.
the movie. Is
So
he
what do
trying
you
to carry
think
his
if
brother
they're
to
putting
safety?
them on one bill and you buy one ticket to
Holy
see both
fuck.
movies, which should they play first? Do you go with the heavy one and then you play Totoro to like be a nice like mouthwash
Honestly, I think it'd be a
afterwards?
heavier
Or
impact
the other
to
way
play
around?
Totoro first.
And then all the kids can fall asleep while the
Yeah.
parents watch Grave
And
of
then
Fireflies.
they watch Grave of Fireflies and go home because you just saw kids after war, which is tough.
I really like the Satsuki
Yeah.
character a lot. I
I
want
do
to talk
too.
about her for a second.
Satsuki's awesome.
Because from the very beginning of the movie, I knew I was going to like this character because they're in the car and she says, May, hide. And then she says, wait, oh, I thought that was a policeman. Get out of the car and wave to, do you remember that
Yeah,
moment?
absolutely.
It's the same in both versions where she's like, get away, like hide
it's
from
the
this
cops.
person.
Yeah.
And then, oh, I thought it was a policeman. It's not. So we'll wave and say hi. I knew I was going to like them from that moment.
Yeah. Satsuki's awesome. I think she exemplifies a great older sibling.
Yeah.
She's not perfect by any means, but she loves her sister. She wants her sister to have fun. She wants her sister to be safe. But she also...
But she gets annoyed with her.
Yeah. You know, there's one of the big moments in the
jealous
movie
of her.
and she gets mad. She's like, listen, like, mom is not better right now. Do you want her to, like, that's the first time she kind of, like...
You're being selfish in
Yeah.
being the type of upset.
Yeah,
That's
you're
not
being
fair.
a baby.
That's not fair.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that moment is so important for Satsuki's character because if she was just the perfect big sister who played, kept her safe, all those things, that wouldn't show that she's struggling just as much as the dad kind of lets on that he's kind of struggling at the end, or that May is struggling throughout the whole movie because she's like, I'm in a new environment, I'm scared, I don't really know what's going on with my mom.
She is
but I
a
know-
baby. She's
Yeah,
young.
she's
She's wearing
4.
diapers the whole time, which
know,
I think
she's
is
so
so
little.
cute.
Yeah.
How true to children this movie is, and how true to just a couple years between these kids is a world of difference when they're that young.
Yeah.
May is still tumbling around. She can go out on her own because she's living in a safe area, but she's
Yeah, but she, like,
tumbling
falls
around.
when
She's
she
wearing
runs.
a diaper. She falls asleep places, whereas Satsuki is a little bit older. She has more social friendships.
Yeah.
She has more of a school-home balance. It's really interesting to see that. And the other scene that I think is really telling of these characters and Satsuki is when they do visit their mom, and her
Yeah.
mom is brushing Satsuki's hair, and May wants to turn, but Satsuki
She's like, no,
yells
like,
back,
let her-
no, it's my turn. That felt so true, and it really shows a lot how impactful of a relationship Satsuki has with her mother in that moment. I thought was great. The brushing hair was great, talking about, I hope my hair is like yours when I get a little bit older.
Yeah. I love that scene.
Dialogue was different in the two versions of that scene, and they both had nice moments. Whereas the Japanese version felt more like Satsuki was saying, I hope I'm like you one day. And the English version felt a little bit more like the mom saying, you're a lot like me.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the vibe in the English one, was her saying, like, you remind me of me when I was a kid, which is really sweet and wholesome. And I like I don't remember exactly how they handle this in the Japanese version, but in the English one, she's like, your hair's like short, like, do you like it like that? And she's like, yeah, I want to keep it like this, but I'm sure it's because she maybe cut it short when her mom got sick because she was upset, and now is like growing it out because she wants to have it like her mom's when her mom is healthy
Or
and
that's
better,
just
like
such
stuff
a
like that, you know?
parent thing of being like, oh, your hair's awful short. What's that
Yeah.
for? Kind of thing.
It's cute.
I think one thing that would have made this movie closer to being a 4.5 for me is if there was a little bit more depth to the parent characters.
Sure.
And if their relationship was a little bit more shown. It was to the point where at the end, when they have their scene together talking about, well, you're gonna get better in no time, I'm gonna spoil those kids, I felt like they didn't have any chemistry with each other. And I think I would have liked a little bit more.
That might also be a bit of a cultural thing.
You're
Because
right.
if the story's written from the perspective of, this is my dad who took care of us when my mom was sick, and this is my mom who was sick in the hospital, he probably didn't, you know, and I know this is true of a lot of relationships of older generations, not all, but there's a lot less maybe intimacy that's shown. There's a lot of respect and care for one another, but
Yeah, I don't know that I needed to watch them like bang on camera or anything, but I don't know, just
the
a little
Totoro
bit
director's
more
cut where they have
warmness
an
to
absolute
feel like
plow sesh.
the dad is missing the mom
Yeah.
at home, and to feel, I don't know, it just felt very, like you're saying, maybe that is cultural, just like an exchange of greetings and news when they come to see each other. Yeah.
But I agree. I think that there could have been more emotional weight to that scene, even where the dad could come in and say, "Oh my gosh, Satsuki reminds me just like you. She's trying to grow up too fast, but she's still our little girl." Something like that.
And there are nice moments where both parents get to show how they still have an eye and belief in the childhood magic that their kids are engaging with, which I think is really nice. The dad is such a wholesome parent, is so encouraging to the kids, does not say what you're thinking is wrong or stupid, does not say, no, your house isn't haunted. Most parents would be like, this house isn't haunted. This is a nice house. Do you know how much I spent for this house? Instead, he's very much like, explore, have fun, come
even
back
when
and
he's
tell me
like,
what's going on.
the stairs are hiding, you got to go find them. That's such a good way to have your kids like get to explore their new environment, but stick together and have fun. Well, I don't know. I think the dad does such a great job, because imagine how hard it would be. You move both your kids by yourself because your wife's in the hospital. Yeah. And like, you don't
I was
probably
a little
have
confused by that. Why do they have to move because she's in the hospital? I got
to be
the vibe
closer
that
to the
she'd been in the hospital for a long time already. No?
I don't think a super long time.
And why couldn't she have just been at a hospital that was closer to where they lived originally?
I don't think there probably was one that was a lot closer.
Really
I'm
rural
sure the
area.
care she needed, they probably needed to go to Tokyo. And so that's why I think the dad was probably closer to Tokyo than the kids were, whatever university he was at, or closer to the hospital. Because if he had to take a train and a bus to get there, then it was probably pretty far away.
I really like the movie. I don't have anything negative to say about it. It's one of those movies that left me wanting more. A little bit more plot, a little bit more
Returns.
of the...
Totoro.
No, I don't need
Totoro
a sequel.
2.
I just think this movie could have been 2 hours
The
long.
double-decker cat bus. Sure, and I think if it were made today, it would be.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I like about this movie is that it's not super long, even though it could be. There are so many stories you could tell, you know, and I think
exactly. They don't tell that much of a story. Not that, and I don't
have
mean
a
that
feeling
in a
you're going to feel that
belittling
way about a lot of Ghibli movies, because it does such a good job of creating this world that feels lived in, but yet unexplored. And it's gonna, I know with me at least, there's so many more stories that I want in so many of these worlds. And it's frustrating, but kind of the beautiful thing that makes you want to revisit. There's so many things I noticed this time watching that even 2 months ago, the last time I watched this movie, I didn't notice.
Sure.
It's really a cool,
I agree
cool
with
thing.
you. I don't think it's always a bad thing. There are a lot of movies that don't really have much story. I watched a Japanese live action film last night called Perfect Days. Have you heard
gave
about
that
Perfect
a
Days?
very high score. Is that about someone with dementia?
No. It is a movie where like not a lot happens. The movie is about routine and finding the beauty in routine and working your job.
Zach's gonna become a slice of life anime fan. I'm so excited.
It was a slice of life for sure. It's not animated, but it was an example of a movie that gives you so little, but what it gives you is so much to feed on that it feels so whole.
You scored it very high. Did you give it a 4.5 or 5?
It's an excellent movie.
That's very high, yeah.
Whereas, I'm not sure. I don't really have any qualms about Totoro, but it's missing a few things. Maybe one of them being that I didn't experience when I was a kid, and when the visuals of the soot sprites and of Totoro would be like, whoa, it's Totoro. Oh my God, he's so big. Which he is, of course. But I didn't get to have that experience when I was a little kid. So I don't think in his short little appearances that it makes the impact that it would if I was a 12-year-old.
Absolutely.
But of course, Totoro is adorable. That's the thing that we
Totoro.
should
He's so
talk
cute.
for a second about before we close out here as we're wrapping up, because we barely talked about Totoro.
Yeah, I love Totoro. I think he's so cute and so... There's something so earnest about him. I don't know. I think... For me, one of the things that fills my heart with joy more than anything else is the scene where he gives them that little present and it's fucking acorns. I think that is like, I don't know. There's something so magical when you're a kid about acorns. I don't know what that is. I don't even like outside, but I used to get hype as shit if I found some acorns as a kid. And if a magic fluffy bear raccoon handed me fucking acorns, that'd make my entire life. You know, I think it's just so cool.
But then also when he has like the magic spinning top thing that lets them fly.
You gotta. There's a line that I think totally encapsulates Satsuki going into her childlike sense. When they're flying on the top, and maybe the line is different in Japanese, I don't remember, but in English she says, "We're the wind." Not "we're like the wind," not "we're running with the wind." It says, "We're the wind."
Wow.
And that
went over my head. I didn't notice
such a cool thing. Because even if, let's say this is all made up and May is upset because her things aren't growing. Even if they just said, May, let's be the wind, and like just spinning around his kids and going wherever the wind was blowing,
Yes.
like they were a part of it, would just be such an escape from that world that they're in. It's hot outside. The dad's sitting
Escape
there
is
fanning
this movie
himself.
feels like there's a lot of escape, and there's so much of it. We're so much in the kid's perspective that you do lose sight of the darkness outside of it because they are so steeped in just everything's magical. Going to the hospital to visit your mom is magical. Going out to look for fruit and vegetables is magical.
That nighttime scene is so good because whether
Which one? When they're at the
where
bus
they're
stop?
growing the stuff, where
Yes.
they're growing the because the dad is sitting there working into the wee hours of the night, and whether it's magic and he hears the nature spirit flute and then hears his kids playing around, or whether he just hears his kids playing, the fact that he lets them be because he knows they need that is so important.
I really think it ties into how the dad, I don't know the cultural way to explain this, but they like give thanks to the tree for guarding them. I think maybe the kids take that idea and run with it to try to get the plants to grow.
Yeah.
That they're like paying the respect that they're taught by their parents to. I really like that. The English version describes it in a better way than all I know is the translation of the Japanese. I don't know how it is in Japanese, obviously.
What's tough is the sub is so old, the translation for the subtitles is probably not perfect.
It's not very flowery. It's not very dialogue-y. It just gets the information across.
Yeah.
But in the English version, he describes it as when people were friends with the trees.
I love that
which I
one.
really liked. And that's kind of part of the theme of that Perfect Days movie is
Ooh, I like that.
there's a Japanese word for the world of image that is created when the light, wind, and leaves all come together and create an image that's only in that 1 second. There's a Japanese word for that. You know what I'm talking about?
Do you remember what it's
the
called?
light hits. It starts with a K. I don't remember. But there are a lot of moments like that in this movie, in the space of the movie where the first time we see the really big tree and it zooms all the way out and then it stops. Everything gets silent for a second and we see the light shine on the tree. It's so interesting, the animation and the detail. And
There's a few shots in this that I think are just like perfect. One of the ones that's so weird to me that I think is one of the best animated like 2 seconds ever. It's when Satsuki's scrubbing the floors, and she's like running, pushing the wet cloth along the floor. That is like so seamless and flawless, and like just the shaping and the angle of that is just so perfect. Because Granny's like sitting there like calm, then you see her just like running across the floor, and the way the water like kind of glistens, like you said, that early composite digital they do with the sprites and with some of the water in this movie is so clean when it had no business being.
because it's minimal.
Yeah.
They just use the little bit they need to create the effect that they need. I think it's great. One thing, I thought that the English version would bring more of the humor out, but there's one moment in the Japanese version that I think is fucking hilarious, that the English version, it doesn't really make a joke out of it. When their dad comes off the bus and they tell him that they saw Totoro, they're like yelling, and then it cuts to a frog that ribbits. But in the Japanese version, the frog like screams, like goes, "Rah!" And it's like totally out of nowhere, and it's like the kids scream, and then it cuts to the frog scream, and it was just about my biggest laugh in the whole movie.
That's incredible.
And in the English version, I think it's just a ribbit.
Yeah, it's just a ribbit in the English. That's so funny. I forgot that. That's incredible.
Well, we're just barely scratching the surface. You know, we could easily do this Ghibli podcast and do 3 or 4 episodes on Totoro, talking just about the art, talking just about the story, talking just about whether the magic is real or not, talking about the sub versus dub. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. And this is out of a movie that I gave 3.5 on. You know, I'm sure there are 4s, 4.5s, and 5s for me in the Ghibli back catalog, and I'd be so excited to dive into it. Steven, for the next minute or two, the floor is yours. Tell the people why this should be our next podcast and get them to vote.
I think that the Ghibli movies do such a good job of tapping into a very specific part of our hearts and souls. Each one a different one. Totoro for me is a very specific window of time where you have that transition from being a free running kid to feeling like the world needs you to be responsible. Yeah. And this is such a good reminder.
For sure.
Absolutely. And I think this movie is also such a good reminder that sometimes you need to not be so serious about things and just enjoy the moments that you're in and the people around you. And if that's the message that
Whether
gets
you're
through
a
so
kid
clearly,
or you're an adult, especially
Yeah.
if you're an adult.
Exactly. And I think that in like what I would say is on the edge of the top 5 Ghibli movies for me, if that message can get through so clearly here, I can't wait to dive into the parts of ourselves that the other ones look at and observe and open up, while getting to talk about my favorite medium of media, which is animated things, because I think you can be so much more unrealistic while still delivering real stories.
You can
and feelings.
use such big otherworldly visuals and show us anything you want,
Yeah.
but still get across such a human, relatable message when it's just a bunch of Gugas flying around.
Yeah.
But you're thinking about the time when you were a kid, when you thought your parents were going to split up and what that was going to mean for you. So you stopped thinking about daydreaming for a while. You're right. It's a really cool way of having, wow, Totoro, cool, cute. And then you think about it and you're like,
Fuck.
man, I was growing up before I knew I was growing up and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a good point.
It's great. It's so good. So I really do hope, I would love to see any of these win, but it would be very special for us to get to go through this journey and talk about the Ghiblis.
I feel like of all of the 4 options, which I think you like and I like a lot, this is definitely the piece of Steven's soul option, right?
So this would be
and
my
it feels
baby.
like that. And I love that. And I don't know, even though I can't relate or comprehend when you're speaking so eloquently and lovingly of anime, I do love seeing that twinkle in your eye that you get when you're speaking so passionately about these things. It makes me want to understand. It does.
Oh,
It does.
thanks, buddy.
Well, let's wrap this thing up with an MVP segment. Did you think of a title
do
for our
it.
MVP segment?
I think it may, until we find something cohesive that works for everything, it might make sense to
do movie
it
to
on
movie.
a picture. Yeah, and this week I decided that I want to give somebody a little green sack of acorns. That's my prize this week.
Yeah, okay, and that fits for who I've chosen, I think.
Yeah. For me, it has to go to Satsuki. I think that there's a lot of great characters in this movie. I think Mei is so fun. I think the dad does a good job. I think Totoro's an absolute Chad. But I had to go Satsuki for this one. She runs until her feet are like bruised and bloody looking for her little sister while still showing her love, which is it's really special. So Satsuki gets my green sack of acorns this week.
Green sack of acorns. I'm going to give my little green sack of acorns to a character that you didn't even mention just then. I think it goes to Granny.
Granny's a real one.
Who is not related to these people as far
No.
as I know. She just watches over this house and works in the rice fields. She works her ass off as old as she is, and she becomes such an integral part of this family. She
Yeah.
hurts just as much, if not more, than anyone when Mei goes missing
Oh
for a
my
while.
God, yeah.
As if she was their grandmother. I think the maturity, and she has this way, I feel like when you get older, you start to become a kid a little bit again. And her moment, one of my favorite moments of the entire movie is Granny telling Satsuki and Mei, oh, you see them, I see them too. You don't have to be scared of them. She just is like in touch with the childhood magic, and she's also a hard worker and treats these kids like her own. I'm going to give a couple acorns for Granny to crunch on.
Love it. Acorn it up.
Why don't we also rate the film?
Yeah.
Let's give it out of 5, or do you want to do out of 5 or out of 10?
I'm an out of 10, boyo.
We can
Because
do
I think it gives you the opportunity to give a more specific score, so I like the out of 10.
out of 10. It should be how many something from the movies we're going to give it. Out
Yeah.
of 10.
How many cat bus legs out of 10 are we going to give this movie?
Out
How
of
many
10 daddy bath dates.
I give this movie 7.5 daddy bath dates out of 10.
I think I am moving, I gave it a 3.5 on Letterboxd, so that would be 7. But I do think I can go to 7.5.
Yeah.
Daddy bath
I think
dates.
that's the right
Sudsy.
score for
I've had a
this.
good bath with Dad, and I think
My
it could
fingers
go
are
higher.
wrinkled. Yeah,
I think it could go
I think
higher.
every time I watch this movie, I like it more.
This is one of those movies where it's not about was it good or not. It's about how deeply did it embed in itself into my soul
Yeah.
with the time that I spent with it. And I need to spend more time with it to get there.
There's certain things that I watch, and my first thought afterwards is I can't wait to watch this with my kids someday. And Totoro is one of the things that gives me that feeling inside.
I can just picture you with your kids who just want to go watch Blippi on the iPad.
Yeah.
You're like, guys, shut up. It's about nostalgia and it's about growing up when you shouldn't have to grow up. And one day you're
Like,
gonna
that
know.
movie came out 60 years ago. I'm 25. Stop making me watch it. I'm like, sit the hell
25.
down and watch the picture.
Fall asleep on Daddy's Totoro belly.
Miyazaki's mom was in the hospital. They're like, who the fuck are you talking about?
So that's number 3. We've got, I think you should lead with Tim Robinson. We've got Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And we've got the Studio Ghibli library of films. I think all of those would be really good podcasts. And something I can't help but notice is both of our podcasts so far have been NBC sitcoms.
It's true.
We have not suggested any NBC sitcoms so far.
We have not. And the 4th choice, spoiler alert, Good Luck Charlie, also not an NBC sitcom.
So there's a lot of options, a lot of varied options, and I'm excited to hear from you listening at home what you think of this one and of all the options, and to see what you'll be voting for in just a few weeks, in just a month or two.
The time is coming.
It is.
Get those clicking fingers ready.
In the meantime, if you want to be the quickest up to date on everything Zach and Steven, whether it's finding out what option 4 is or getting the upcoming final Good Place recap episodes on End of the Time Knife, patreon.com/can't disappoint podcast is the best place to support us for a few bucks a month and get everything we do before anybody else does. And in the meantime, Steven, where can the people find us?
You know, if you want to stay up to the minute for free dollars, that was free, Free. I do not have a speech impediment.
That spells free. Creditreport.com, baby. Saw their ad on my TV. I don't know the next part, do you? F to the R to the E to the E to the... sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Went on the internet and went on the...
Get connected for free with Education Connection.
Come follow us over on Twitter, over at
Education
Time Knife Pod. We're also on
Connection.
Instagram. Come check out the YouTube. Search the name of any of the shows that you watch us on, and you'll find us along with some videos. Tits up for St. Patty.
Tits out for Totoro.
Yeah. Oh, tits out for Totoro, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, get us out of here.
From inside Totoro's tree hole. Black Lives Matter.
I'm Zach.
I'm Steven.
We love you very much, and we'll be back next time on End of the Time Knife to keep going through the final season of The Good Place. Have a good week, and we'll see you then.
Totoro.
Excellent.